Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Wednesday night, and we have to ask the question that's on everybody's mind. Hey, did you see this one? That may be my best intro yet. What's going on, everybody?
We were there too.
It's me. God damn it, Kaylin. It's me, Jason. And I'm here. It's another week of, hey, did you see this one? This month, we're doing a very special fan picks edition of, hey, did you see this one? I believe that we're going to do this week and next week for sure. And then the final week of the year, we'll see, because, you know, holidays and all that, we'll have to see if we can even do it, if we're all not too busy. But I digress. I am, of course, Jason. I'm with my co-hosts, as always, Steven and Kaylin. And we have a guest this week, Tim Covey. Hello, Tim.
Hello.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. This is super cool. This is actually a first-time experience for me. I've never done anything like this, so I'm actually really excited.
Well, I know that you are a movie person. We've watched film together. We've talked about movies. You are actually one of our very first fans. You can give yourself a pat on the back for that. And also, I believe the movie that we're doing this week, the stop-motion feature, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, The Adventures of Mark Twain, was the first movie ever requested. We've had a few.
Put that in quotation marks, please.
This was the first movie ever requested in the history of film on a podcast by a fan / guest. I'd like to thank you for your continued support. Like you said, this is the first time you've done anything like this. So typically podcasters go on other podcasts, but this is interesting because you're getting to cut your teeth being on a podcast for the first time, trying it out. Obviously, you're a friend of the show. We'll have you back. But let's get right into it. So we're doing The Adventures of Mark Twain. I'm going to say Tom Sawyer 1,000 times throughout the evening. It is a stop-motion classic. I'll put that in quotes.
Classic.
It is. You guys know a lot more about the history of this movie than I do. I'll just so at the top of the show, obviously we do our history with the movie. I'll go first just to get it out there. Today was the first time I watched it. I was born the year it was made. I saw when I was looking for pictures to put up on our social media, I did see it's called like Kids Features or something like that. It was like a VHS box that had a bunch of different titles. It was Care Bears and all kinds of different titles were under this header. And I remember, I've probably seen this movie. I don't remember it at all. I've seen the Satan scene on YouTube or TikTok or something. Somebody being like, look at this ridiculous kids movie. It's the devil talking to Mark Twain and kids. This is for kids. That's all I really know about it. Now I've seen it. I still really can't speak about it very well. I can't talk at all right now.
Your brain is made out of modeling clay.
My brain is made out of modeling clay. When I try to like process what this movie is, I would say it's meant to be sort of a series of vignettes loosely tied together with like a story, but it's even like there's only really like 2 or 3 vignettes, but we'll get into that. So let's go right to our guests. Tim, let's hear, since you suggested the movie, let's hear a little bit of history with you in this film.
Well, I was still very young. I was only 2 and a bit when it came out, so I don't actually remember when it first appeared. But when I first saw it, it was one of those experiences. I don't know if this makes much sense, but it's one of those experiences when you're young where when you try to look back and remember it, you're not too sure if that actually happened or was that my imagination. And so I remember things like the Satan segment and the Adam and Eve stuff and all this strange stuff, but I didn't think that like I remembered it from something that actually existed or something substantial. And I was wondering, did I just associate that with California Raisins or any of the other stuff from that same studio? And then it wasn't until the early or mid 90s where I managed to sneak to the basement of the house and stay up late and watch like Showcase late at night, and it would be on that, like a children's quote unquote children's show.
People on acid watching it on Showcase. They're like waiting for the porn to come on.
Yeah.
Maybe to cut me red shoes.
Then I definitely have seen this because I used to watch a lot of Showcase on Saturday night, if you know what I'm saying.
You've seen the end of it like 17,000 times.
And then the beginning of the next movie. And then back to video games.
It must have been like, for dirt cheap for Canadian television to air something like this. Like that, or Rock and Rule, or another one of those kind of like weird unsuccessful projects. So yeah, when I finally saw that, I was like, oh, it's real. Oh, this was something real, and I didn't know if that was good news or bad news. And but
maybe you manifested it from a nightmare.
Now it's a nightmare that's infecting the whole nation.
Yes, I'm psychically affecting everyone else now. So then realizing that this was like a full thing, and still not quite realizing the production company and how involved with so many other things that I've enjoyed in film and television and stuff like that. But like when I first watched it, I wasn't too sure what it was. Like, is this a National Film Board thing? Like, because that...
Did the government pay for this?
Yeah.
There's no MPAA number, I'll give you that.
So and so that was my early experiences with it, and then kind of not until the early 2000s did I get the full idea of what this was, and that was during a time when I was reading a lot more and reading stuff about Mark Twain, or Samuel Clemens more appropriately, and then realizing, oh, this is all a part of it, and then the tapestry was complete. And that's more or less my history with the movie.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Steve, what's that kids show that we were watching for a minute? The live action one from the 80s. It's Canadian. Do you recall? We watched a few episodes.
Grassy Junior High.
Like drunkenly. No. It's like a kids show where they go on adventures. It is fucking super psychedelic. We watched a few episodes like drunkenly on Zoom.
Is it what? Psychedelic kids show?
Anyway, I can't remember what the name of the show is, and I'm gonna look throughout the show. But it kind of this movie kind of had the same vibe as that. Obviously, it wasn't stop motion, but just like that weird, like, we have a budget to make a thing. We're just gonna make a thing, and it's for kids, so we can sort of mess around within those parameters. And then it's probably a bunch of like people out of school, like fresh out of like animation school, just trying to make their first movie, cut their teeth. And
you're wrong about everything you've said so far.
I'm wrong. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
This is like the man who invented claymation, like the guy at the top of his game. This movie is considered to be a great achievement and accomplishment for clay animation. It's what like blazed the trail towards what we know as stop frame animation and the puppetry that exists in that realm.
So everybody in those
this is like
credits,
its infancy.
Everybody in those credits are all people that are like, accredited animators and stuff.
Yes.
Well weathered.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, if you compare this to a lot of other claymation stuff, it's not good. So like stop frame animation and claymation are two different things, right?
Yeah.
Stop frame is puppets. It's like The Nightmare Before Christmas is not made of clay. It's sculpted puppetry. Whereas this is like they're literally using modeling clay, and it's like part of the look of that style of that filmmaking is for things to be weird and kind of moving and like not always perfect every frame from frame to frame.
You can even see like their thumbprints at points.
Yeah.
I like to call it perfectly imperfect was what came to mind while I was watching it.
Yeah, and also the movie was like actually pretty well financed and planned out and withheld its release so that it could align with the Halley's Comet actually passing over Earth. They like waited a couple years to release the movie so that it like aligned in its release with the comet.
I have a similar thing to Mark Twain, where I was born like the year before Halley's Comet, and when
April Fool's Day.
when I'm roughly 75, it'll be back, and my goal is to live to the next Halley's Comet.
And then become a comet person at the end.
Exactly, and I'll make a spaceship and fly up to whatever the fuck happens at the end of that
movie. You gotta take a big slice of Americana, take a bite, and start writing some great American novels, Jason.
Yeah. Otherwise, yeah.
I'll write the next Huckleberry Finn.
You should reboot Huckleberry Finn.
They already rebooted Huckleberry Finn. It's called Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and we'll get into that and more when we move into the body of the.
It's an era we live in when they're talking about like the Ferris Bueller being a reboot of Huckleberry Finn.
A reboot of Tom Sawyer.
It's like the word reboot has lost all its meaning on this podcast.
And that movie came out 35 years ago. Okay, Steve, let's go to you next. What's your history with this film?
I like Tim didn't really think that this was real, and I just on Canadian television a lot when you were a kid, it was one of those things where they could just accumulate all these random shorts and they would play them to fill spots between scheduled programming a lot of the time, right? So as a kid watching TV, if you're sat down by your parents to watch the children's channel, if there's not something slotted for that time slot, they'll just fill it with random bullshit art projects that are like so confusing for a child to watch. Like it's just like a ball of goo turning into a pencil and drawings on the wall. It's like all this weird sort of like art student stuff that was probably all harvested from within Ontario or Canada abroad. Anyway, so I just thought that it was one of those things, like the imagery in my mind from this movie, until a few years ago when that scene, the Satan scene, was kind of circulating again on the internet because it was just being passed around, sort of had like a bit of virality to it. And actually a couple of weeks ago, we did a small gathering where we like just had like an American Thanksgiving just for fun. And I was talking to my friend Cam, and he started quoting that masked Satan, and I was like, what is this? And then he explained the whole thing to me, and I was like, what? And then he showed it to me, and I was like, oh yeah, what is this thing? And then he said it's the Adventures of Mark Twain, and I was like, what? And then I remembered that you had mentioned that, and I was like, oh, maybe we should do that movie. And so my first real watch through that I can remember was today. And I tried yesterday, but I was trying to do it while working and realized that like you have to watch it. You can't just like watch with your head half watching. You got to watch everything because it's fucking weird as hell. Everything is weird. The background stuff is strange. There's little like anyway, we'll get into that stuff. But yeah, my impressions of it were, what the fuck? So I did a little bit of research and reading today because I didn't know much about it, and I didn't realize, like Jason, I would have assumed all the same stuff that you would assumed had I not gone and read about it today. And
I can't believe that. Like, I assume that this was a movie then that was created and put in theaters. Yeah, at least for a limited run. If there's no MPA,
it didn't do very well, surprisingly.
Sorry, say again, Caitlin.
It was, from what I understand, the first full-length feature claymation film.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And it tanked really bad. It was in $1985, it was a $1.5 million budget, and it made about $850K. After
that's not too bad.
It's not great either.
If movies don't at least make their budget back, they're flops. If they don't make 20% more than their budget back, they're flops.
No. If they make their budget back, they're still a flop.
Yeah,
you have to
That's what I'm saying.
Movies now have to make double their budget in order to be considered profitable at all.
Avatar 2.
Yeah. Anyway. Can you do it, Avatar? Can you make it to $5 billion?
No. It might make $5 billion over the next 20 years.
Well, if they keep it in theaters, yeah.
If they re-release
it in theaters or whatever.
I'm sure it'll do fine. Let's not talk about Avatar right now.
That's true. It did. IGN gave it an 8, so I'm sure it's very middle of the road.
Yeah.
The joke is that
I'm sure a high rating is a middle of the road movie.
IGN gives everything an 8. Okay, right. Kaylin, let's hear it, buddy. What's your intro to this film?
My intro to this film is our good friend here, Tim's suggestion of it. And I watched it last night. I got medicated. I took in what was happening. it was a roller coaster ride of emotions.
Which emotions?
Yeah, all of them. The roller coaster is like this. Just like going
pretty much.
Muggles.
There were a few chuckles. There were a few. Wait a second. There were a few. Ooh, I like given like the time that it is, like that it was created, like the as far as the technical aspect of it, was like this is actually, I like what they did technically with it. Mm-hmm. And then at the end, so I don't know that much about Mark Twain, but I guess he's got a few different stories that kind of comprise this kind of this. You mentioned
sort of like
earlier,
if you consider it like an anthology television show. Every little story that they go into is a Mark Twain work. Like it's all based on some work by Mark Twain.
Yeah. Which brings us to tonight.
I can't.
The story of Mark Twain.
I can't for the life of me.
The year was 1980 something.
I can't for the life of me.
And Jason was born.
I can't for the life of me.
This is the story of Mark Twain.
Figure out what this fucking show is. I have a
Imagine
list.
Jason was the reincarnation of Mark Twain.
I am. Look at me. I look like a young Mark Twain.
The next Halley's Comet passed over and Jason was born.
Mark Twain picture behind you.
Because I have our social media information behind us.
Yeah, because what he has there is more useful.
It's more useful than like. Look at Steve's. Look. Here,
I can't see.
Look. Actually, fucking.
Remember when he was on Star Trek?
Tim looks more like Mark Twain than I do. Tim, give me a little bit.
I want to talk about that episode of Star Trek for a little while as well.
Where they go meet Mark Twain, and he's like, "Oh, 4 and no, wait, that's Abraham Lincoln."
And what about that blue fella? You don't treat him the way that you treat your superiors. Of course we do. What?
Madam Gaiden.
You can't fool me. I'm Mark Twain.
There is a bit of a sore spot in this that's based off a Mark Twain novel. We don't have to go into it, but I do want to gloss over it quickly. There's Mark Twain had some interesting descriptions in his books. He's got they had a friend, Mark Twain, Tom Sawyer and Huck had a friend, a couple friends. One had a horrible name and one had a slightly less horrible name. The slightly less horrible name pops up in this, and then they show him and it's horrible. But surprisingly enough, Tim mentioned this to me about a week ago, and I was like, is there just going to be like a whole story with Indigenous Joe? And he just kind of shows up as a reference. And I feel like this, if in 1985, there were probably like, the way that we like the MCU, there were probably Mark Twain mega fans. And there were probably Mark Twain mega fans going to see this movie and pointing out every little bit of like lore from Mark Twain books. And
Mark
I think
Twain cinematic universe.
Exactly. And I think unfortunately Indigenous Joe is for the diehards. That's the vibe I got, because they just
I mean that's the character's name in the novel, right? And
yeah.
I mean, at the time, like that, the sort of connotations we have around that kind of stuff is not the same as it is now. Through a generational lens, obviously we have the foresight, and energy to not go forward with those types of things. But in the era that this movie was made, it's just there, and we're not going to go into huge detail about the character, so we can just say we acknowledge that it's terrible.
We acknowledge it's terrible.
I feel like the movie kind of acknowledged it a little bit as well, where we get the duality of Mark Twain at the end, and kind of the way that I saw that was he wasn't perfect. He had some less favorable aspects to him, is how I kind of,
because by the 80s people were very aware that he had a really bad racial slur all over Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, but that character in the book isn't, they don't call him that in a derogatory way. That's just because that was the style of the time. Everybody was hyper racist. So
but it's still it's completely different. I guarantee you 100 years from now, you read a novel written in the 80s today, people are gonna be like, I can't believe people spoke like this. This is fucking insane.
God. Yeah,
they wouldn't say fucking insane.
They would say this is florging insane.
Something like that.
Can you florging believe this?
You can't say transgendered.
Yeah, there's going to be all sorts of stuff. I mean, I recently reread Marathon Man and forgot that there are a lot of stuff that would be edgy right now. And so, yeah, in that kind of context as well, what the characters are like, Joe in the original story is a victim of a lot of abuse, and that's why he is the way he is. That doesn't really forgive that depiction, but at least explains some of the context. And same goes with, I think it's Jim in the other character, that he's also escaping slavery, and there's also a lesson to be learned from it. So they're not weaponizing derogatory terms in that particular instance against anybody. It's you know, and Mark Twain was a bit of a humanist while being a misanthrope at the same time. So a part of that complication in why he's not a perfect person is reflected in his writing, and it's not to forgive it, it's merely to explain it, because it is a really, really rough depiction of anybody Indigenous and all that kind of stuff. And in his life, in reality, there were some issues that he, would have to learn to get over if given the opportunity.
I think within the context of the movie as well, it's like that character was the villain of the novels, so like they wanted to throw something in from the novel that would be like scary to that character. So it's like obviously they're gonna choose the villain of the book. Like it's, I guess they could have done anything. They could have just put a big scary monster, but the entire movie is like the adventures of Tom Sawyer with Mark Twain on his fucking crazy hot air balloon that looks like a steamboat in the sky.
They do that with every franchise. Eventually they put them in space.
Always, exactly. It always goes to space.
Yeah, but space in this one looked pretty dope at the end. I gotta say, it was pretty cool.
That was like some 2001 shit.
It looked like heavy metal.
Mark Twain in the sky being like, "Make 'em laugh, do 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 do, make 'em laugh,"
and breathes them away with his awful cigar smoke.
Yeah,
that
but also that cigar saved them. Let's not forget.
Yes, that and laughter.
Because they kind of
powerful weapon of all.
They kind of create this weird mystery where they're just showing this guy from the neck, from the like waist down with a cigar. It turns out to be the dark side of Mark Twain, which was interesting. Mm-hmm. And I think
I
you're
did
right.
Like that quote, like how we're all moons and we have a dark side.
Yeah, yeah, that was a good quote.
Yeah, he's got a sick Two-Face suit at the end, going right down the middle.
Yeah,
he should have got two girlfriends, one an angel and one dressed as a devil.
Yeah, one no, not Uma Thurman. One
Drew Barrymore.
And who?
I don't know who the other one was.
I can't remember who the other one was. Who the evil?
Because the other one's no longer famous. That's why.
She's Uma Thurman in my head, but then Uma Thurman was in the next movie.
Yeah.
Weird.
She kind of reminds me of Cordelia from Buffy.
Maybe we'll do the nipple Batman movies eventually, but
hooray!
Let's talk about the riverboat in the sky.
I do want to touch on the overt religious undertones that I did not
overtones.
Literal
Adam and
regular
Eve
tones
story like being barfed at you for like half the movie.
I feel like Catholics wouldn't have liked that part.
No, and also the depiction of heaven actually makes heaven seem pretty tight. Does Tom?
You get to pick your heaven.
You don't get to see the human heaven, just the perverted alien.
Robot.
Yeah,
that's actually that's actually an a bit of an extreme adaptation of the original story, which I think was his last published work, where it's about that captain going to heaven, and heaven turning out to be not as we've been taught in church and all that. Yeah. So it's kind of a furthering of that idea, where it's not only are there no angels with wings, now they've got 3 heads and they have wacky kiss parties, and
it's kind of
they're all smoking cigars.
It kind of reminded me of Hell from like Little Nicky. How like you picture Hell to be this place, but Hell in Little Nicky seems awesome. You get to hang out in a room and listen to Iron Maiden, and Hitler.
Do you like pineapples?
He's getting raped by a pineapple. It's sweet. The other thing that I don't, did he have a story that was like a comedy about Adam and Eve?
Yeah, the diary of Adam and Eve. Yeah.
And is it like, it's meant to also be like a
satire,
like a comedy book.
There is satire,
like
and
a Dave Barry book. It's kind of the vibe.
Well, I might be kind of adding or paraphrasing a bit, but I believe it was a bit of a satire on his views on the relationships between men and women.
Oh, I absolutely.
As he viewed in that time.
Isn't it? Or is it? Doesn't he also have Eve's Diary and Adam's Diary? Like it's like two different. Like one's called Eve's Diary, and one's called like Extracts from Eve's Diary, or something like that. They probably combine them into one book eventually, but I've never read it. But is it not like their literal diary entries?
Yeah, it's written as diary entries, and I think it's him self-inserting as Adam, and him writing in the voice of his past wife.
Yeah,
right. For Eve, yeah.
That's pretty cool.
That is interesting. That explains why the whole thing is in diary entries and why it plays like I wrote down in my notes that it played like a boomer like comic strip, like the level of comedy. But then you have to realize that these jokes were written in the turn of the 20th century, right?
Yeah.
Right. So like as far as
rewritten again in the 80s.
Yeah. Like as far as the early 1900s goes, like those are all kind of banger jokes. Now it's like. Now you see those as memes on Facebook that your great aunt has posted.
For me, it's actually most certainly those two little vignettes are among the weaker of the movie for me. Only because I don't really find until the very end it doesn't really hit on anything too poignant or significant. I find it kind of dawdles a little bit, but I guess you got to make it feature length. You got to get these things going, and as you kind of said before, there, even though there's so many sections to this movie, really there's only, 2 or 3 that really stand out on their own. So I do find it is a little like stretching the dough a bit to make the pizza thinner.
And that's
some people like thin crust.
I think that's funny. I think that was my problem with it ultimately. I really wanted to just keep going back to the ship and see what was going to happen to them next. Mm-hmm. But I do understand that this is the Adventures of Mark Twain, so I guess it kind of hinges on them finding his works. They start kind of he tells them the first story about the frog race, and then they find his books, and that's where they get the Adam and Eve stuff from.
Moral to that story, never leave your frog unattended.
Moral of like the whole story is this fucking frog is just
will eat anything.
Although the animation that they used for the in between was clever. He just turns into like an orb of clay when he's jumping back and forth. I thought that was a good little, and they use little shortcuts like that a lot. Like there's a really nightmarish scene where Adam is running into the distance. He runs forward in great detail. His hair's going all crazy. He has the best face in the film. I thought his face was looked the most like a human, not like a caricature. He just looked.
Oh, you mean like the most accurate to human movement?
Yeah, that's not saying much because the rest of the characters all like Eve. They spent 6 minutes on clearly, and then on the other end of the spectrum you have Mark Twain, who looks like a still life drawing, like almost caricature of him, and then the kids,
just his mustache going like,
yeah. I guess Huck Finn also has a pretty like Huck Finn's face and his voice matched really well. I thought, I thought that was really good, but I really liked watching Adam. I just liked what they did for him. But anyway, I digress. He's running towards the screen, and then he runs off into the distance, and he has a similar thing where they just animated his like front leg out in front and in back, and he keeps turning into like little blobs, and it's just it's a good like effective shortcut. I feel like, which was really interesting to see them do these little shortcuts and then go back, because a lot of like claymation you see over the years, like there's some bad shit out there, and there's some bad stop motion, and there's some bad claymation, and I thought if this is
you take it back.
I will not. The whole the scene that you're sitting in front of, Kaylin, for instance, that whole devil scene.
My favorite.
is the best part of the movie. It's the weirdest. It's the most unsettling, and that
I don't think anybody would argue with you with that is the best part of the entire movie. Like, if anybody says otherwise, it's like, what kind of pervert is preferring the bullfrog race to the like existential crisis of manhood depicted in beautiful like masquerade ball mask that has emotions and can mimic other faces.
And that's just it. Speaking of beautiful, this whole movie, we watched it on YouTube. I don't know at what point they remastered this thing, but it looks fantastic. You could say, like, I wouldn't think if I just happened upon this and I didn't know anything about it, I wouldn't think that it was from the 90s or from the 80s. I think it might be from like the early 90s, or the late 90s rather.
An extra 10 years.
The late 90s, I meant to say, Kalen. Jeez.
All right, 15 years.
Yeah, that's a big leap in technology, right?
Well, I think like also they probably had to film this at like a pretty high like film stock on a pretty high film stock, which means it captures more quality, right? So like, and so they'll be able to clean things up so much more cleanly, even from just like a film transfer to like a digital. They can pick up so much more detail, and if they keep the original film and like have it archived properly, every time they go back to make a new like a Blu-ray or 4K or whatever, they can go back and reference the original film, and they can take those because they're so clear, right? Like a photograph is like a million times more clear than something on a tiny like a tiny frame versus a large frame. You can get so much more detail.
I believe that was part of what made Will Vinton so revolutionary, or at least trailblazing for claymation and all that stuff, was that he was bringing like 35 millimeter capture to this whole scheme, and that adds all sorts of depth of field, a lot more, a greater spectrum of colors anyway. So that really opens up the arena for the animators. That was the big thing, one of the big things that he brought at the beginning of it all.
Can you give me a little bit of education on Bill Vinton? Because I feel like I've seen his work, even from seeing this movie. It looked like this style I've probably
I'm gonna guess Rudolph.
Is it
I don't think he was involved with Rudolph, but things like California Raisins, that was
the clay ones. Like Rudolph is puppets. He didn't work with puppets. He worked with pretty much primarily clay and only clay, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Didn't he also do the Noid?
He did the Noid. He did M&M clay animation commercials. He also did a whole bunch of work with CBS.
Slim Shady M&M? The Brisk iced tea commercial?
Actually, they wouldn't surprise to find out if his production company was involved with that, but I'm not too sure if he was still in there. There's a whole history to this. My buddy Derek was actually giving me a little bit extra education on this, but there's like a whole funny history to it, because it does actually end up leading to things like Coraline and Kubo and the Five Strings.
Ooh,
and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, we were supposed to this summer do a month called Laika at the Lake House, which is Laika's like the studio that was born out of his studio that eventually was like bought by like Nike or something, like something weird, like a huge corporation bought the remaining ownership of his company.
The guy who does own Nike, he bought it and gave it to his son to run, and then his son would end up doing things like like Coraline, and they brought in I forget the guy's name who did the actual direction for Nightmare Before Christmas to start working with the studio. Right. So there's like a huge history, and like shows that would come out of this would be like the PJs that Eddie Murphy.
Oh yes, I remember that.
Yeah, that show.
And animators did like claymation for early versions of Hey Arnold that would become the Hey Arnold show. So like these people did all sorts of work, and like you may even remember on CBS where they would have intros and outros to their commercial breaks would be
after these messages.
Yo, what about Pingu?
Pingu is French, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure you're right.
thing that I was just looking at his IMDb while I was being regaled with this information, Tim, and thank you for that. That's great. That's a good quick look at it. But he actually was on the animation department for the Return to Oz movie.
Yes.
Which did we cover that on this show, Kalen, before
before I came.
No, I just reviewed it on my own, but
we talked. I think it came up in conversation once, but we haven't actually done.
I did watch that movie recently, and that it's very similar to this, an 80s fever dream of how the fuck did this thing get made? Why did they make it? And for kids, you can do whatever you want in a kids movie, like short of making it, no sex and swearing, basically.
It's educational. It's about Mark Twain's works, the great works of Mark Twain.
It's about the ramblings of a fucking old 70-year-old man.
A man whose brain has been split in half, literally, and he's leading a kid through his nightmare works.
Like this. Every time it sounds, when Mark Twain talks in this movie, everything sounds like a non sequitur, like piece of like lesson.
It's because like a lot of his actual quotes from his books.
That's what I figured.
Whenever he's saying it, it's just like
right towards the end.
Like, a raisin isn't a grape until it's been a true wine.
Naked people have little or no influence in society, and that's why they put clothes on Adam and Eve. The Adam and Eve story was a little bit wrong because I'm pretty sure the Valentine was created much later.
Yeah,
it's probably Mark Twain trying to inject some of his own life into it.
Yeah, of course.
That's how I took it. Yeah, juxtaposing his life with his wife onto those characters.
Like, she's constantly nagging me, but I'm Adam, so I don't even understand her on a human level. She's this random creature. And then when they
drown this baby,
they keep having kids, and the kids are all. He's like, I get when the kid gets a little older. I understand that, but the shape of the first part of the baby, I don't get that. Also, the Adam and Eve story, I hate, and I've always hated inherently, because it implies that it's one big inbred situation. One big and I was like, they all they had to do was say that every so often an Adam and Eve would appear in Eden, and then the same thing would happen and they get kicked out, and that's why there's multiple foundlings. But no, the Christianity is like, no, you're all brothers and sisters in God's way, is a thing that people used to say when I was a kid. And I
heard one thing.
Yeah, but if we came from monkeys, why are there still monkeys?
That's a good point.
No, it's not a good point, Kalen. It's a bad point.
It's a bad point.
I said it in a funny voice.
Sorry, Kalen, what did you say?
I was reading something where, like, it's speculated or whatever that Adam and Eve are clans and not specific individual people, but like clans of people.
That would be okay, but still, that's just some religion came along, some like similar sect, and was like, let's change it up a little bit. Because it's all fiction, we can do whatever we want, and let's make it so they're clans, so now it's a little bit more Romeo and Juliet, which is still fucking weird. There's two families. Come on.
You're telling me that they should update an ancient document?
I'm telling you that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Aliens came, had sex with some monkeys. Here we are.
So Adam and Eve had 35 kids.
Adam, alien, Eve, Earthlings, aka monkeys.
No. Eve was made from Adam's rib.
Yeah, I mean, in that story, yeah.
And then she
was
a
ripped out of his chest and got turned into a person.
And she was a harlot who tried to bang a snake and eat an apple. And then God was like, "You don't bang the snake or eat the apple." Those were the two rules.
But Jason's biggest problem is that it doesn't make sense that we're all related.
Yeah. Not that he was made out of clay and he breathed life into him and all the talking animals. And
I do like when God is creating everything and he makes a river and then he accidentally makes a tree and goes, "Oh, what am I doing?" I didn't mean to do that.
That sounded kind of like almost like kind of like darkly ominous, like at that beginning, kind of like the creation sequence.
Mm-hmm.
Also, all the shit that he was making before anything really took shape made no sense. Everything was like
no, it was like some Dr. Seuss shit.
Yeah, like Dr. Seuss banana trees. But Eden, compared to like the rock patch that they end up in after, Eden looked really cool. Garden of Eden.
Mm-hmm.
We had that here on Earth for a minute, and now we don't.
That's the whole planet.
Now
Let the nature back.
Now the whole planet's a sludge patch where you can get cancer real easy. I was watching
drinking water. We're all full of plastic.
We're all full of microplastic. I was watching a thing on how the nukes that have gone off have added just nuclear material to our atmosphere.
That's why I feel so irradiated all the time.
Yeah, that's why I'm just sick to my stomach.
Also, how much of your meals do you microwave?
None. We don't own a microwave. That's one thing
that's good.
We got rid of.
What kind of popcorn? Do you ever have popcorn?
I don't really subscribe. We have a popcorn maker. I don't really subscribe to the
But how the hell do you make popcorn, man?
Popcorn maker.
Okay,
I don't think that microwaves change the molecular structure of your food that much. I just think that microwave food is gross more than anything.
Yeah, it's always better if you warm it up in the oven or on the stove. It's
we have a
hot longer and it adds a little bit extra.
No, it's called
reactivates the flavor.
No, just leave it room temperature. It's fine.
No, don't take that advice.
Kaylin's like, I only eat raw food.
I only eat raw chicken that's been left out for days, and I don't know why I have constant.
Yeah, if you want to be concerned about something, be concerned about all of the genetically modified chickens and pigs and shit that you eat. That's what you need to be more concerned about, not a microwave.
Popeye's chicken is the shiznat.
Do we even have? Oh yeah, we have Popeyes now. No, sorry. Do we? Yeah, we have Popeyes.
You guys have it. We have it. Many of them here. We have Chick-fil-A here, which I've been to exactly one time. I know it's horrible.
Actually,
I don't support them.
Shameless plug. A-Dub, best chicken nuggets, hands down.
They're okay.
How is that a shameless plug? Do you own the restaurant?
Yeah. Do you have a franchise?
Okay, well, what's it called when they don't give us money, but I talk about them?
You're just talking. You're just
free plug.
Free advertising. Free advertisement. Well, that's been the random advertising corner where we just suck the teat of corporate America.
There's some good crossover with Will Vinton and Henry Selick, the director of all of the best puppet movies ever made. The Night Before Christmas is probably my favorite because I watch it the most. But I was also in the perfect bubble of age and just being an awkward weird kid that everything like that was I absorbed it so much, and then you had to hide it when you got to high school because if you wore a Jack Skellington t-shirt everybody would think you were weird. So I'm okay,
it was I'm a couple years older than you, Steve, and it was a very similar thing for me. But when we entered high school, people based their whole personalities off of it, and it was okay for a little while, which was fucking weird. And then the people that were a couple years below us, they were also super into it, and then when they got to high school and they were like that, ridiculed. Just go get a swirly, nerd.
Right.
So it's weird how a couple years can change the landscape of something like that. I'm sure right now there's a bunch of prepubescent teens who love the Wednesday show, but then every 10 years you go up to me, I'm like, that's not the Addams Family, And then 10 years before it's that's
not my Addams Family.
I'm 27, pretty good. I recently watched the new ones, and then 10 years before that they're that Wednesday Addams show is the perfect adaptation. Those cartoons, I don't know if they're doing it for me.
I feel like you're using all these other examples, but it's the Nightmare Before Christmas people still wear that. Nobody's
That's
wearing
a good point.
Fucking Addams Family t-shirt.
I feel like people make their whole personalities Tim Burton still, not necessarily.
Of course they do, yeah. And I don't think it's a great thing. I don't think it's a healthy thing for your whole identity to be wrapped up in a movie that came out in 1994 that happened to have really cool aesthetics. Just relax.
That's
a very basic story. It's just you're in love with the aesthetic, which is fine, but you don't have to become the aesthetic.
That's why I brought up Wednesday specifically, because it's the most recent Tim Burton thing, and most Tim Burton fans are like,
"Oh, it's Tim Burton."
Yeah.
Yeah, but
also, if you do want to wrap yourself up in that, that's cool as well. I'm sure you'll get over it one day. But some people don't. I know people who still just have so much Jack Skellington shit. I'm and they get new stuff, and I'm oh my god, man.
Yeah, what's that place called? Spencer's or Spenny's?
Spencer's and Hot Topic both sell that shit still. They still sell Sons of Anarchy stuff.
Well, now the Disney store is finally opening up and being yeah, I guess we do technically own this. We should probably just sell it out of our actual stores.
And then you have Disney adults who there's probably a Venn diagram of Disney adults and Jack Skellington fans. It's just a circle.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah. Anyway,
I always found it to be very gateway goth. That people who were about to go goth started with Nightmare Before Christmas paraphernalia.
Yeah, just wearing a lot of stripy shirts and
yeah,
black and white. Yeah,
strands, tathers off their sleeves and stuff. Yeah.
Sure, yeah, but that's kind of like the healthy leap, because like the goth community is so vast, right? But there's not really like a Nightmare Before Christmas community where people get together and like sing like there's Halloween. We're gonna have a Halloween festival this year.
What about the under the bridge dwelling techno goths who dance?
That's just another sect of goth, right? Like there's nothing.
Have you guys ever wondered why the goth crew never got along with the plastic crew?
I don't know what that means. Could you elaborate?
Well, they both like makeup. They both have a lot of attention to fashion.
What's the plastic crew? I guess is my real question.
The Barbies or whatever.
No, because they're
women who wear too much makeup.
The plastic crew is they're all about symbolism, symbols like money, like status symbols. Sorry, that's what I was trying to say. And people who are on the emo side sort of feel like they're outcasts of society. They're usually also rich because they can afford all that shit. But they're
but the similarities.
Like, how the hell did you find a World War III replica gas mask?
Exactly. The thing that I always found hilarious when I was a kid was I hung out with
wearing
punks.
like a hat.
Don't make me get my gas mask.
I hung out with punks in the early days of the internet, and they were being influenced by the older punks who actually lived 6 people in an apartment or on the street and dumpster dove for trash for dinner. And then it was the high school punks who went on to angryyoungandpoor.com and used their parents' credit card in the early days of the internet to buy overpriced punk paraphernalia and like
the belt with the bullets on it.
Yeah, that shit, you could find that.
I think we kind of lost the plot of this podcast.
Okay, sorry. It's all...
We're like now just going through like the Spencer's Gift like inventory system. And like, all right.
This movie isn't super content dense, I'm gonna say.
It isn't, but we haven't even talked about it yet.
I got one thing. Satan remind me of Hexadecimal from Reboot.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, yeah, it's based off of like a theater mask, right? Like when it first shows up. So, and that's 100% what Hexadecimal is based on, and this is like even more so.
Hex was based off of this, and then this was based off of Final Fantasy, right, Jason?
Yeah. So let me get into that real quick.
No.
Final Fantasy 6. That's a running gag on the show. I will say that there is one video game. We are on Twitch. I like to do a little bit of a video game relation. Steve doesn't care for it, but I'm going to do it. I'm wondering if Shigesato Itoi, who is the creator of the Earthbound franchise, was influenced by this because his animation style is based off of these little clay figurines, specifically in the second game. I think he did it for the first game as well, Mother 1. And the snake had these, like, its eyes were sunglasses, and that's an aesthetic that happened that shows up in the Earthbound games. It's also kind of a thing that you see in anime.
Also, Chester Cheetah was wearing them for a while, so I think all the animals are just getting real into wearing sunglasses at that time.
Are also their eyes? No, Chester Cheetah had sunglasses on. The snake's eyes.
No, you're right. His name is Chester Cheetah Cheeto. Cheetah is his middle name.
What about this Sprite guy? Remember that Sprite cartoon character?
Cool Spot?
Yeah, that's a dot. Yeah. Remember that one, guys?
No, he was a guy with like wavy hair or something.
Yeah, Cool Spot.
That was his name?
Yeah.
He was a little spot with a mohawk, yeah.
The Dots had a video game too, but the actual character was Cool Spot, and he had a video game as well. How come they never made a video game based on the Adventures of Mark Twain? That's what I want to know.
They did. It's called Rampage.
There's I think there is a Tom Sawyer video game though.
This could be a sick JRPG, I think.
Was it one of those ones that you get in a cereal box?
Probably.
Does it come with a warning, a language warning?
Or it was made by it was made for the NES. Yeah, it has a language warning. It was made by that company that made Bible Quest, and it's on the NES, and it has the full language in it. It has Indigenous Tim and Jim, whatever their fucking names are.
Yeah.
Oh God. Yeah, I'm sure. Remember those like Math Quest games and shit when you were a kid, like the ones where you had to like go into a school and solve a bunch of mysteries, but it was all like solve a math problem or like know a history fact or like what kind of brass-based instrument is this?
Math Blaster. That was a good one.
Math Circus. they had lots of them, but they had them for writing and they had them for history. It was all these like learning software programs that came out in like the mid 90s where like I guarantee you there was
gosh, mid 90s. I had games like that on my Commodore 64.
Right, sorry.
Nice.
Late 80s. Yeah.
I wanted a Commodore 64 so bad.
I didn't and still don't even really know what that is.
Played cassette tapes.
Oh, Commodore.
Oh my God.
Blow your mind. Okay, here's the thing from the movie. Why does Adam, the thrill seeker, keep going over the waterfall Steve-O style? Yeah, dude. In various cool items like a barrel in a tub and totally unharmed. And meanwhile, Eve is just like putting up 1,000 signs. Is that because women are narcs and men are cool?
I would say that women are organized and men are dumb.
Yeah, that's a little bit more actually accurate.
I mean, that's still a stereotype thing to say, but like I think that's kind of like that's the feeling I was getting across.
I like it. I got the. I was like, why is she naming everything? Why does she keep naming everything? These things don't need names. And he tries.
Doesn't he also say like every time I try to name something, she's like, no, let's not call it that.
He calls a dinosaur like a wharf or whatever.
Yeah,
or an
she's
elephant.
Like naming them better.
Well, that pays off when he finally comes up with the name for the Valentine, and she says that's awesome.
That's a good point.
Yeah, true. Good point. Nice.
I think I'd call it a Valentine.
There was a few times throughout the movie where I had a little bit of a hard time hearing it. Mm-hmm. Did she say, "Want to see my etchings"? And was that code for sex?
I think
there's a lot of stuff that was code for sex in this movie. Remember when the tails of those two aliens are like going like this past each other? I'm like, that's supposed to meant like to look like they're dancing, but it looks like they're fucking.
They're just dance humping.
Why am I Henry?
It just looked like two weird alien dongs like trying to hang out with each other.
They also have that sexual tension throughout once they start sort of kind of working together. That picket fence part where they're like building the fence and then tearing the fence down was totally out of a like Harry Met Sally style movie. You've got Mail where they like hate each other and then they're gonna fuck.
Yeah, it's a real I'll have what she's having movie,
maybe even Archie Bark. What's that guy's name? Archie
Dead on Arrival, 13th birthday.
Archie Bunker.
Arku Bunker?
Bookie. Holy moly.
Archie Bunker was not that. He was a overt racist who had a loving family and loved.
He was a racist that was designed to teach racists that being racist is bad.
Yeah.
That's like what the show is about. It's like,
but this
it showed that he was a horrible racist, and then they're like, but he's got to have moments that show that even he realizes that he's being an asshole.
This was also back in the day when like people actually learned lessons. If they tried to do an Archie Bunker today, he'd become a folk hero. Not unlike Donald Trump became a folk hero.
I don't know if there was a time where people learned lessons because
look
at the fucking world we're living in right now.
As soon as I said it, I was like, when I think back then, they just probably added more fuel to the fire than taught racists not to be racist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He would also always have like a lesson. Like, I did call that guy the N-word, but he was a real cool dude, so... Maybe probably still going to use that word, but maybe I won't have hate in my heart towards him as hard. And that's sort of every episode of Archie Bunker. Mm-hmm. I am still going to call him that. However,
I mean, I don't know how much Archie Bunker you've watched, but there's some pretty good. They sing by
the piano. He calls the guy the N-word.
There's a creator who does like the history of queer representation in television and cinema, and he's done over the last couple of years just like extensive examples of sitcoms from the era introducing characters who are gay or in any way queer coded, and like Archie Bunker is one of those shows where they actually did like an extended arc of like basically a trans woman. And at the end of the day, Archie's a pretty good guy about it. He's like, who cares if he wants to wear a dress?
He did call her the T slur, and
he didn't actually. He just didn't care, but then like she gets like beat up or something, and then he like really cared. He's like, what the frick?
Yeah,
Archie's gotta take care of business.
He sees the
Grabs
Archie
a baseball bat. It's just a sofa, like a recliner.
There's like an Archie Bunker Mario Kart where he drives the chair and Edith drives the piano and.
Anyway,
video games. We're on Twitch. What's up, Twitch?
Let's get back to the Adventures of Mark Twain. So that's more or less where like the first arc of Adam and Eve kind of ends, right? And then we move into
they hit a storm or something.
Yeah.
And then I think it goes from that into the Satan stuff, right? Do we want to talk about the bullfrog first, the bullfrog stuff, or do we want to go right into Satan? Because I think Satan.
Well, in the storm, I noticed, and in the last little segment, they have like slight references to Disney throughout. There's a Mickey Mouse head on a flotation device when he's going over the waterfall, and then he's doing the like symphony thing to the storm, like in Fantasia. Yeah, and I'm wondering if you guys found any other ones, because my eyes kept like glazing over. I kept going completely like.
Is that what you call it?
Because I do know that Will Vinton did do some work with Disney, and a fun connection for you, Steve. He worked on the Captain EO thing.
Oh God!
Yeah,
Captain Jackson.
But I think it was strictly for the theme park portion of it, where he was some kind of animation consultant. So it wasn't anything.
Okay. I mean, there was a lot of cool practical magic happening. I don't know if anybody's ever seen it, but it was basically like a ride in Disneyland where Michael Jackson was like a sort of like a Han Solo, and he had like all these aliens and robots and stuff that were like his crew, and he was flying around trying to save someone from like a garbage queen or something.
Yeah, I noticed Will Vinton also worked on a part of Moonwalker.
It's pretty cool. I mean, you know, the company in which you keep while watching it, or who you're watching on screen aside, the content of it is actually pretty amazing, and like the special effects are really good, and the dancing's good. But yeah, it's called Captain IO. Captain IO, we've got to get to the garbage planet, the garbage queens. At it again.
I've heard of this thing. I've heard of Captain EO.
Yeah.
Oh, it's screwed up. But yeah, it wouldn't be surprising to find out that there are even inside jokes, not just in the Adventures of Mark Twain, but in a lot of their stuff that they take pokes at it. Because even like Don Bluth animations every so often have little pokes at Disney and stuff like that too.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And I mean, Jack Skellington has appeared in almost all of what's his name, Henry Selick's movies. He even, I'm sure that's the most obvious one that everybody knows is like in Beetlejuice, when Beetlejuice is coming up out of the table, you can see Jack Skellington's skull is right on the top of the circus tent or whatever, as the bats are spinning around.
Yeah.
But throughout, there's all over. Like in James and the Giant Peach, there's literally just another Jack Skellington that appears. It's almost like they cast Jack Skellington in the role of Ghost Pirate, and just for like, all right, Jack, we need you for this movie. The only one who's got the board structure for it.
We're all out of puppets. What do we use? What do we got?
Jack Skellington.
That's like the Pixar thing of putting other things from other movies in the
next movie.
Well.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, just a fun fact, I guess.
I wish I like that they do
animation is like the one that they can mostly get away with it, because there's not giant sets where people are going through everything with like a magnifying glass, right? But like even in like Guillermo del Toro puts little weird Easter eggs that you'll never notice unless he's doing an audio commentary, being like, you know, the banister here actually has a secret face, and it's from the other movie.
I find that the movie
Hellboy is carved into the banister in Pan's Labyrinth.
The movie version of that mostly happened in the 80s, and it was like you can pick out where they've used the same like props in multiple movies, or
I think
or
that was
backgrounds or
use
lots and stuff. And I know that's just being practical. But
that's like they literally have to do it because they don't have the budget not to. It's like, we need to reuse the set. We need to the Millennium Falcon statue to make a random building in Blade Runner or whatever. It's like we got all this Star Wars shit. Let's crack it in half and turn it into a building.
Why not?
How long do they keep old set material for?
Until they do something like that, reuse it.
Are you an aeronaut or an aeronaut?
I'm an aeronaut personally. A lot of that stuff goes into a Raiders of the Lost Ark style like warehouse too, just because it needs to be kept.
Oh, like very big on-screen props and stuff. Yeah, but like this pieces of set,
the actual pieces of
cars
set,
and shit in the background. It's like just huck it. Yeah, we don't need to keep that.
Oh yeah, like you can do a drinking game with Star Trek from the original series onward to Enterprise of all the different props they reuse from all of those eras.
I'm down to play that drinking game with you, Tim.
It's a new series that we're putting out on the Hey Did You See This One network called
Watch All of Star
one?
Trek. Yeah.
Hey, did you see the prop?
Did you see that prop?
Yeah. Boom. We're producing as well as having a great conversation.
But it's also like, sorry, the point that I was trying to make is that like animators have so much time looking at one scene. Like they'll spend 3 months on 24 frames of something that they're looking at the same shit every day, and the director is not there every day, the producer is not there every day. They can add something into the background that they know will be there for like just a tiny second and no one will ever see it.
Yeah,
right?
Like all the weird sex stuff in Disney movies.
I was thinking more about fun ones like in the James and Jack and stuff. But
I'm gonna make two people banging in the background of this fucking Fievel Goes West nonsense nobody's ever gonna see.
It was Adventures Down Under.
It was the Rescuers Down Under. No, I think it was the first one actually. There's three. There's Fievel Goes West, Rescuers Down Under, but I think
Fievel is a different thing. There's
That's a Don Bluth
American
movie.
Tale, and then Fievel Goes West, Rescuers Down Under, and then another Rescuers or something.
Oh.
There's the first Rescuers where it's like on the bayou and
the Rescuers.
Yeah. And then it's the Rescuers Down Under where it's a giant eagle.
They're in Australia.
And then Fievel Goes West.
And then
Fievel Goes West is not part of the same cinematic universe.
Fievel was a rescuer, okay? It's the Rescuer cinematic universe.
No, he was a Don Bluth creation.
They're all talking mice.
That tomato looked delicious.
I think all talking mice look the same. Okay. I'm sorry to admit it to you guys, but
that statement won't age well.
See, in the future, people
are gonna be like, I can't believe he was talking
podcast.
about mice that way. Mice are like have like weird helmets on now that make them super smart.
They talk. They talk.
Do they have bikes?
This guy's a real son of a bitch.
I wanted to touch a little bit on the kid moviness of this movie that really takes it down. This movie could have been like heavy metal. Okay, it could have been a psychedelic fever dream with a little bit of edge to it. Could have at least been like a PG-13 kind of a thing, Make it a little bit more edgy. But the fact that it's a kids movie, kids movies do these things, and it happens in kids programming. And the reason why adults don't watch kids shows is because they do these long scenes where it's just to captivate a small brain that can't really think beyond what they're seeing. I recently went to a friend's house who has a 3-year-old, and they were so YouTube has these videos where they just make like really bad CGI that looks like it was just rendered with like an engine in the Unreal animation style, and it's just rendered, and it's just cars driving around and they're talking to each other, and like their lips are barely moving, and it's just colors, right? And old kids movies kind of have this problem, and this movie has it in spades, where there's just long swaths of just things kind of happening, and it's not really progressing the plot. It's not really doing anything that's stimulating. And I feel like both of the Adam and Eve parts had that really bad, and the beginning of the movie had it pretty bad, and it's just stuff goes on for way too long, I think, is my point. And it's just because you plop your kids down in front of this movie. Now, if you plop a 3-year-old down in front of this movie, they're just going to be like, they're not going to remember it. They're not going to really register it. But if you plop a 6-year-old down in front of this movie, that's where we get people like Tim, who like has this fever dream memory in the back of his head, wondering if this was real or not. And that's sort of the way the 80s kids movies were. Like Labyrinth isn't a good example. That movie has a little bit of edge for it. It's not necessarily for a little kid. It has some nightmare scenes, but it's no different than this. If this had a little bit more substance to it. And I think that was my biggest problem with this. It didn't have enough. The stuff that I liked a lot. And that's the animation. The animation in this movie was captivating. But storyline-wise, I just felt like I was watching something that wasn't made for me.
Well, yeah, there isn't really a story. There isn't really much of a plot happening, right? It's like,
right.
Hello, my creation. Get into my airship. Now let's fly to my death. And like, basically it. And like, and then throughout, you're just watching the little vignettes throughout in order to like, you know, not just fill time, but like explore the works of Mark Twain and like his thought processes throughout his career or whatever, right? I think is like the main goal of this movie.
The problem with that is like, you have to have like a really vast knowledge of Mark Twain to sort, because I don't. I know
I argue that point. This actually made me want to kind of learn more about him.
Oh, I agree with you, Kalen. I do agree with that. But going into it, I really only knew Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn. Like, I really only know that story.
But isn't that something to be said about the movie then? Like, if you're saying that the one thing I took away from this movie is that I'm maybe slightly more interested to go check out some of John Wayne's crazy books.
John Wayne. I want to see the John Wayne version of this movie now.
Mark Twain. And like, you know, especially the more interesting aspects are quite gripping, and you're like, did he write something like this? Like, what is this story? And like, I actually, The Mysterious Stranger is one of the only ones that I have read. I just like, you know, the main reason is like they didn't make a movie out of it. If it had like all the other ones that are important, I like read or watched by
this movie is sort of Mark Twain's what's that Stephen King, The Dark Tower.
Yeah, it's his cinematic universe. All of his creatures and characters have come to life, and he's on an airship. It's kind of fucking crazy.
On this airship, you can get to all of his universes. It's Dark Tower, basically.
One could argue that this is just a dream that Mark Twain is happening while he's dying in bed as Halley's Comet flies overhead.
It kind of is that in a weird way, where it's his imagination seeing him off to his death, and like some of his most beloved characters are piloting him along the way.
He says so much in the beginning. He was like, I was born in Halley's Comet, and I'm going to die at Halley's Comet. And they're like, you're perfectly healthy, sir. He's like,
yo,
nope.
Education.
He's like, I said I'm going to die. He pulls out a pistol.
Tries to shoot an apple off his own head.
It's my God-given American right to carry this wherever I go. See?
And children will watch. But to your point, Jason, of like, so what is a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old? What are they supposed to take from watching this? Because like the frog story at the beginning is almost like an Aesop's type fable of you know, where it's kind of out of proportion, like who's shoving lead inside of a frog, and kind of, you know, it's nonsense, but it's to prove a point of like, you know, to not really to be more thoughtful when you're trusting people to and all that kind of stuff. I mean, so many.
I mean, there is probably a reason
your frog unattended.
So hard.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like one of the main things is like the set audience for this movie, I don't think was really driving with it at the time, right? Like the people it was made for were kind of like, let's go see Return of the Jedi for the 13th time instead of seeing.
And that one nerdy friend who's a huge Mark Twain fan is like, but this Mark Twain movie I hear it's got really bad review, because there weren't many reviewers then. It's got really bad review in the newspaper. Let's go check it out. We can always hop to next theater. Well, you couldn't really, because it's probably the drive-in or like, you know, just one theater. So that's probably your whole
This
weekend
definitely
ruined. Did
not play at any drive-in theater anywhere.
This
No
like
way.
A mall Rainbow Cinema theater.
Yeah.
Any drive-in I've ever been to, you get to watch both of them.
Yeah.
And just as we're complaining about how nobody can really get anything out of this movie, they drop the most insane scene that's ever existed, which is a direct pull from the book The Mysterious Stranger, except it's told from a way creepier and scary. Actually, they're both pretty creepy, but this is a much more visually intimidating and scary. The actual story is like 3 kids they're like exploring the woods or some shit, and like they find another kid, this young boy, and he's like described as being like infectious and like completely beautiful, and like they just implicitly trust everything that comes out of his mouth. And then he slowly starts to like help them build a world and like allows them to make people.
Rip off The Mysterious Stranger for like Stand By Me, and I'm using rip off Steve.
Why? Because there's days in a story, or I don't understand where you're drawing similarities to that.
Forest.
It's kids, 3 kids.
Forest.
Therefore, Stephen King stole the story from Mark Twain, from John Wayne, and John Wayne hit him with a car.
And then John Wayne hit him with a car, and he got real thin. He kept thinning out. Does
Mark Twain mean going Mach 2?
What?
There's a part when they're on the blimp ship steamboat.
Mark 2.
Yeah, when they're shooting off their, it's almost like they're trying to measure, as you would on a sailboat, like how many knots you're traveling or how far to anchor, and they're calling the distances Mark and Twain.
Yeah.
That part was very strange.
My pronouns are Mark and Twain.
To say the least. Yeah.
I was kind of like, I was wondering, I'm like, are those actual like nautical terms that I'm not familiar with, or are they just like maybe they're aeronautical terms that I'm not familiar with?
That's
how many parsecs is that?
In space.
How many parsecs is a Mark Twain? What's the conversion on that?
Less than 13.
enough to find a comet.
Yeah. So the scene is like, I guess, basically telling the exact same story as the original book, only instead of it being like a beautiful child who's having engaging conversations with them and like basically tricking them into believing that he's one of them. In the story, he does also reveal that he's Satan. I don't think he's the Satan.
Well,
he's like
an angel. His name's Satan.
What?
He introduces himself as an angel.
I'm talking about the book. I'm not talking about this.
Sorry.
Because there's a couple of different versions that Twain wrote about The Mysterious Stranger. One of them's called like Number 44, and there was a few different versions, and none of them are technically truly finished works, except for more or less The Mysterious Stranger. But they're all kind of incarnations of either Satan or Satan-like, or the nephew of Satan, which...
Yeah, like a family, distant, like, my uncle, he did some shit.
I had to
really
fucked up family business.
But, I'm okay. I'm okay. No. Satan used to be an angel in heaven, and he got kicked out of heaven, and that's how hell started. That's the story. So he's just like, God doesn't really look like fondly on my family, but we're good.
Yeah, he sent down Michael. He sent down Mephistopheles. He sent down Lucifer. He sent down Metatron. He sent down Beelzebub.
Someone has been
Megatron
lately.
He sent down Megatron. He sent down the biker mice from Mars. He sent down Voltron. He sent down Thanos.
Anyway, I just wanted to like briefly kind of like, it makes me want to read some of the other ones to see how similar they are, right? Because this story is extremely similar, even to the point that I think some of the lines that Satan says are like direct pulls from the actual book itself. And like, yeah, it makes me wonder like how much of the bullfrog story is actually as accurate from the actual book, and like same
Does
with
Mark
the
Twain have like a
Adam and Eve
collected
stuff.
works of like Aesop style fables? Because I wouldn't be surprised if he did.
Oh yeah.
Especially if he was dropping knowledge bombs like, a cauliflower is just a cabbage with a college education. Which I liked. Yeah. I got it.
You like that one?
And
then he calls them cabbages afterwards.
Yeah,
he's like, all right, good night, cabbages. Yeah.
It kind of makes sense. The way that I interpreted that was that, the bottom part of a cauliflower is essentially the same consistency as a cabbage, but it looks like the cauliflower is its brain.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, nice. I like that.
But
I like that.
You can eat the
We used to call them dirt brains back in my day.
Back in the Dust Bowl. It's all we could grow.
Get that dirt brain over here.
Oh, Frank.
We're
having dirt brain soup tonight.
Trade me 3 dirt brains for a carrot.
Yeah. We're gonna have a mighty fine dirt brain yield this season, I can tell you what. Look at that dirt brains.
I felt like a bit of like capitalism, sort of, where he was talking about like, we'll just make more kind of thing, right? Like basically the human populace is
we need them. He doesn't say we'll just make more. He says if we need them. Yeah, so he's like, I won't even make any more of these little fuckers.
It's very, very misanthropic because like, it's not even just anti-capitalism, but like anti-materialism and the short-sightedness of mortality, where your need for resource ends up overtaking you, and you can't see the value in the other people around you. And that kind of hits along a lot of the weirdness of how that scene kind of hits everybody, where it just and how it stands out so much, because it's so alienating, where it resonates a weird feeling that you didn't quite articulate as a kid until seeing something like that.
Yeah.
And that's a very 80s kids movie thing to happen, where there's like watching Secret of Nim, and like you start to understand parenting a little bit while watching it as a kid,
right?
And stuff like that. So there's something about that kind of articulates a thought and feeling that you kind of had in the back of your head about people, but not quite expressed until watching this. Not to give the movie too much credit, because there's plenty of parts where it misses the target a little, but I think it's not just that it's weird and that it's dark, but that it's also expressing something that we are somewhat familiar with in our human nature. And that I think that in particular for me is why that scene kind of stands out and crowns the whole movie, and makes it so so it just makes it stand out wonderfully,
because it has the most. It has the most. If I want to see a whole movie about that Satan character as the villain, and these kids having to.
Well, the thing is that he's not a villain, and that's like even more, or like it's not even a he. It's like the voice actor is like a male and a female speaking simultaneously, which is kind of creepy.
It's
cool.
Actually the voice actor for the girl. What's her character's name anyway? But the girl does the female.
Who, Becky?
Becky, yeah.
I was gonna say Huckleberry Sue.
Huckleberry Tina.
Yeah. Huckleberry Tina does half the voice of Satan. I forget who does the other half. But that works very well in that it's an androgynous creature.
Wilbur Vincent.
Wilbur Vincent does the other voice. Yeah.
I wrote down a quote from Satan. He finds humans interesting, but he finds the lot of them to be worthless and greedy.
Mm-hmm.
So
is it bad that I associated with the Satan character a lot?
You're the
if
kind
you think
of person...
that human beings are disposable and that you can just kill them and make more if you need them, then yeah.
You're the kind of person that watched Black Panther and said, yeah, the villain was right, because I was that person.
The first Black Panther?
Also,
yeah,
the second Black Panther, I was kind of
like... That's the point of the whole movie.
Yeah.
I think
the whole movie of Black Panther is like, the villain is right.
I think that the villains in the Black Panther part of the MCU are going to be mostly like, yeah, they kind of had a point, because Namor kind of had a point.
Well, the Mysterious Stranger was written later on in Twain's life, and took him like 10 years to write it.
It takes a long time for you to hate humanity enough to be
able
to
senile,
to be able to convincingly write Satan.
Or not senile, cynical. Sorry.
That's exactly the word, is that it's almost like a personification of cynicism rather than anything truly evil.
Right.
It's just exhausted, because he lived through the Civil War, and though in childhood he didn't see anything wrong with slavery, he ended up growing up to realize that it was very wrong, and
that's a good point. Yeah,
wrote about it. So, like, there's actually a little article that he wrote about being disgusted seeing people celebrating the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, and that even if you disagree with someone politically, there's no reason to celebrate the destruction of somebody. So
unless their name is Donald Trump.
Whoa.
So for someone who experienced a lot of the worst that the 19th century had to offer in America, so like he had a lot of ammunition as to why to be so cynical towards people, and certainly that's personified. And you're absolutely right to use that word cynical, because that's what Satan and the Mysterious Stranger kind of is in the movie anyway. It's just this. It's so distastefully cynical, and it's contrasted with these three kids.
It's weird though, because it also seems like it understands that human beings have sort of a different thought process than it does, and like you see that in the moment where they come in and it's like, are you hungry? What is your favorite fruit? And gives you like your favorite fruit to munch on.
Yeah.
And then there's that beautiful shot where it's like kind of created that island for itself, and the camera is sort of slowly pushing in as it's raising the castle out of the ground.
Which, when you think about the claymation aspect of that, to have camera movement while doing that must be like unbelievable to storyboard and plan and execute.
Yeah. That one shot probably took like 13 days or something, or like maybe even more than that, you know, like.
Yeah.
Well, I know that the movie took 4 years to make. It's not a long movie. So, you know, it probably did take them at least like 13 to 20 days for that one shot.
Yeah. And it's wonderful. And it adds to that whole thing that like you're being encouraged to follow this it's a curious individual, but you're also kind of wary because it's also abyssal in the background, and like
it's not even like you think it'd be like you picture it in like a star field or something, but it's just a void of nothing. It's just like emptiness, being like I can create stuff too. And like I said, like the kindness, it's not even like a kindness, it's almost just like it understands that people will be more responsive to its wants if it makes them comfortable. And so, you know, it gives them the food, and then it's like, oh, maybe they'll enjoy this, and then it's like, I'll make them a little thing to do, like an activity to do. You can make some people, here's some balls of clay, make some people, and we'll make this sandcastle together. And then once they make the creation, it's like this, it's not even a flip, it's just sort of like they're enjoying their town that they've made, and then just like humanity, the little clay puppets start fighting over something, and then Satan swats it almost like, you know, like you would a bug, like an ant while you're at a picnic or something, you know, just, and then just like, whoa, this noise is too much for me, and just you're ruining my sandcastle.
And instead of just extinguishing their lives as easily as it created them, it decides to do physical violence to destroy them. And in front of other beings, so that they know dread and terror.
You're saying?
Yeah, Mark Twain gets really introspective talking to Satan. I noticed he gets really like, oh God, and I think that's fuel. I wonder if there's a way to watch this movie where you can sort of try to figure out which version of Mark Twain you're actually seeing throughout it, because after he gets super introspective, they go back. And that's the scene where he plays the organ, and he plays the sad version of the main theme of the movie. And that song, I paused the movie, and I immediately went to YouTube to try to find it. And there's people playing it themselves on an organ. Like this song seems to be like a pretty big deal for like organ players. Also, people like isolated it. There was a soundtrack for this movie at one point. I was reading some old like archived forum about somebody like called a number from the back of a thing that they found, and they like talked to this person who used to work with the production of the albums, and the albums are out of print, and all the rest of the
this sounds super factual.
People are just like, I just want to get my hands on that organ beat.
Pretty
so good.
I did. What do you mean super?
Gotta go harvest some organs.
That's what I read.
No. I'm not. I'm playing along a little bit. It's like, yeah, I heard from this person that heard from.
That's
this
exactly
other person.
it. Like that's exactly it, because this movie was barely like a movie as far as like a recognized film. It was it was a thing.
There's weird stuff like that though, man, where like a movie is shit, but the soundtrack was really hot for some reason, and there's like collectors that want the original press.
The Dick Tracy soundtrack.
Dick Tracy, yeah. Well, Dick Tracy's also was okay. Like
it's kind of a cult like.
I mean, I haven't watched it in like 20 years, so
I don't think I was a huge Dick Tracy fan when I was a kid. I had all the action figures. Don't think I saw the movie. Don't think I saw the movie a second time. I think my dad showed it to me. I don't remember it at all. I remember the kid.
The guy who plays the president from Bullworth or whatever.
Yeah.
Are you just listing the cast of Dick Tracy right now?
Madonna and the guy
Dustin
from
Hoffman.
Dustin
the kid from Peter Pan from
Al
Hook.
Pacino was Flatheads. No, wait. Al Pacino was not Flatheads. Al Pacino was
he was
Big Lips or whatever.
Big Boy Caprice. He was Big
Boy. Big Boy Caprice over here.
Eating lots of walnuts.
Yo, Batman Forever though, dope soundtrack.
Yeah, but Batman Forever has a contemporary pop.
Yeah. It's not like people haven't still been singing that song in karaoke like up until today, probably.
The Dick Tracy soundtrack.
I sing that song every time I go out.
The Dick Tracy soundtrack, there's 2 soundtracks, and one is just a Madonna album of the songs that she does in the movie, but the other is all these weird new takes on old, like, 1940s songs. And that album I had as a kid, and I still, like, it took years for people to end up putting it on, like, YouTube, and I think now it might be on Spotify, but I was looking for there's, like, a Mr. Fix-It version from the early 90s, the song Mr. Fix-It, that they did a more jazzed up poppy version of, and like I looked for this thing from the Napster days up until a few years ago, and you should
just watch the movie again.
I want to watch the movie. I have
That's probably how they got it on YouTube or whatever.
Well, there was one
captured the video.
There's this thing that people do where they play their records. It's just a picture. It's just a video of their record player playing songs off a record, like.
Yeah.
And I imagine that the soundtrack for this film was probably on record. It probably will surface one day.
Let's get back on track here. That was a good brain scramble to be like, what the fuck are we talking about? Let's get back to the movie.
The music in this movie was pretty good. I did want to shout it out. I was going to play that song because
I'll be back in 2 seconds.
I was going to play the song from the movie because it's only a minute long, but then also, like, I don't know what the fucking rules are, dude. I'm sure that we're not going to get DMCA'd for it, but, hey, Stuyverton is in love with Tim C., says Stuyverton. He pops in from time to time and says hello.
Actually, on the note of that organ and all that kind of stuff with the ship, it was very, like, Jules Verne esque. I found, like, if you remember the old 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea movie that Disney did with Kirk Douglas and Peter Lorre and all that, there's the part where Captain Nemo's playing the organ and all that. So I found there was a whole bunch of stuff with that ship that was very much I wouldn't say inspired, but like it parallels a lot of that kind of aesthetic that they're using, like that kind of, if they're going to use more or less the technology from the time. So like the switch directions on the deck, to go forward, it looks like straight off like of a steamboat and all that, right. Especially since it's got the steamboat paddles at the back and all that.
It's like a sky steamboat, steamy skyboat. Yeah.
Yes.
I am uncultured swine, so I did have to look up Jules Verne, and he's the man who penned such hits as 20,000 Leagues Below the Sea, Journey to the Center of the Earth, Around the World in 80 Days, Journey 2, starring The Rock.
What, you've never been?
I was making a joke. I don't think he wrote a sequel book starring The Rock.
What does that even mean?
No, okay. I think what Kalen has probably seen the Journey to the Center of the Earth movies, and that's what he meant.
Oh, okay. I was like,
starring The Rock.
You've never been around the world in 80 days?
I think the first one has that kid from Road Trip, the skinny kid with the big ears. He was in the first one.
Almost all of his books have been made into horrible cinematic failures.
Hey, that's an achievement.
Jules Verne, master of the adventure story. None of them good on screen, especially the live action remake.
Seems like they should all be like perfect. But doesn't
they're not bad.
Around the World in 80 Days has Jackie Chan, right? And he's just in an airship the whole time, not even fighting people.
A hot air balloon.
They're hot air balloon.
They're not the whole time. They land and have adventures.
And then he does karate.
They're not just just a really, really long, like 3-hour movie of Jackie Chan in a hot air balloon every once in a while going,
he somehow still breaks his arm.
He almost got blown off course. A ninja hot air balloon comes up and he has to fight a bunch of ninjas, and then it falls, and then another one comes up.
I don't know if that's true or not, but I believe that.
He just fights. He goes across the world, and every once in a while, a very stereotypical hot air balloon comes up full of stereotypical fighters, and he fights them off one by one. Every country.
There's Vikings for some reason.
Wasn't there a reboot with Arnold Schwarzenegger?
After the Jackie Chan 90s movie?
That's another movie, but it feels very much like of that, like the same sort of quality of movie where it's like very intense period costumes with over the top wire work action and stuff. You're like,
Around the world in 65 days.
Yeah, he's like, I can do better.
We'll go down this time.
It's like those 7-minute abs. They're good until someone comes along with 6-minute abs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a whole exercise arms race in the 80s and 90s.
Are we done with the Satan scene, or is anybody? I feel like the Satan scene itself.
I moved on to the existential crisis organ theme, so yeah.
Right. Yeah, the scene that's every movie that has a captain of some sort of powerful ship has to play a sad piano song at some point.
After he looks into the abyss, literally.
Yeah, well, I rewatched the Pirates
in Rockadoodle.
I rewatched the Pirates of the Caribbean movies recently, and Davy Jones does the same shit. He sits at his giant organ in the front of his ship and just plays a sad song with his tentacle face.
Yeah. I forgot about the movie Rockadoodle.
But I'm sure that is
Rockadoodle's dope. Elvis as a rooster with a kid who turns into a cat or something?
You're going to hurt Steve if you keep talking about Rockadoodle while he's trying to tell you about Sad Davy Jones.
No, I was trying to move back to the organ so that we could finish talking about the scene.
Well, yeah, the organ's very stereotypical, like it's like Fan of the Opera-ish kind of thing to do. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But for a simple kids movie, it's effective.
That was my low-key second favorite part of the movie, I would say. The song, I'm gonna listen.
It's visually pretty cool too.
I saved the song on YouTube. Like I'm gonna go back and listen to that all the time. Like it's a good little tune. When I was doing research on the song, I found out that there's like the main theme of the movie. I think it plays during the credits. It's by some artist of the time, and I can't remember the name of the artist. Kaylin, okay, stop laughing at my inaccuracies.
I mean, it's in the credits, I'm sure.
Yeah. I don't have the credits of the movie pulled up though.
But like, honestly though, for movies like this that like go so under the radar, there's like probably all sorts of talent. Like it's almost like when you see like the war memorial size list of names for these animators for movies that like you look at it and you think like, wow, that's a lot of talented people that just pass us by.
Yeah, you don't even get to. Well, I mean, imagine the amount of time it would take if they did it old school, where it's like one name per line. You'd be there for like an extra hour. It's like, come see Avengers 5, 7 hours long.
I'll tell you where they do that, Steve.
5 of which is the credits.
Have you ever sat through the credits of like a video game?
Yeah, it's because
that doesn't have the like press up to scroll. Like a Final
because they know you're not going anywhere.
Yeah, because
they won't. I thought you can't scroll through them. I thought you have to watch them.
Some you can.
Not always.
Like I just finished God of War and it was like skip it if you want. We know you have no time.
They always want to put a post-credit scene now, so it's like, do I have to sit here for 15 minutes watching the name of the guy who animated the grass in the background?
Respect? Yes.
Not even the close-up grass, like
Jonathan
the faraway grass.
And don't get me wrong, that's some primo grass that they've animated there, but
yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Everybody deserves representation on the screen at the end of a thing, but yeah, it's unfortunate. You're right that like even if you are the person who worked on it and you were waiting specifically to see your name,
yeah,
if you're in the theater, you're probably not going to see it. You're not like, oh shit,
you guys
I was on there somewhere.
If they made like a little, almost like a little short film vignette or whatever of these behind the scenes people being characters in some sort of little short film vignette.
That would be interesting if they did more stuff like that nowadays.
That's what I would do.
But that kind of opportunity came and went with the DVD extra. Now we don't really get they don't really make. I feel like movies
they don't put the time. They don't put the money into it. They don't do extras anymore. Yeah. I know because I still buy them.
That said, though, I bought the new Spider-Man movie for my dad, and it has like so much extra shit on it. So they do it sometimes.
Most movies, not most, but like a big movie, if you're buying it and it, you can feel the weight. There's another disc in there. And you're like, oh, there's another whole other disc. I bought the final edition of Blade Runner, like Ridley Scott's Blade Runner. You could murder somebody with this case. It looks like a regular Blu-ray, but it weighs like Like I feel like I could huck it and probably cause significant brain damage to somebody if I hit them hard enough.
Yeah.
6 discs in there they hit on me.
What?
Like, why is this
That's like
so
every
heavy?
version of the movie ever created.
Oh
yeah, and like hundreds of hours of like bonus content and stuff. Like some movies do it, man.
Oh
some
yeah, and
still
granted,
do it.
for something like Blade Runner, it's almost deserving because like there are those movies that are like trailblazers for visuals or for, for production or whatever. Yeah, but when it comes to
and the different cuts, yeah.
Well, I mean, I can't even like sing the praise of those extras enough from when I was a kid, man. They made me like really believe that I could get into a creative field and not just like have to get a weird normal job. I was like, I can do this maybe.
Steve,
watching The Matrix a million times.
To you. Find a physical copy of Clerks 3, put it in, and Kevin Smith has a special message just for people like us.
Oh, okay.
Go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
Nerds.
No.
Stop podcasting. Yeah.
And then he says, penis, penis, dick, penis, dick, penis.
I was going to say, hopefully.
How dare you throw shame on my good man Kevin Smith's name?
Hey man, I'm a huge Kevin Smith fan as well. I did not care for Jay and Silent Bob reboot movie.
That's one movie. He's got a bunch.
Okay.
Nobody here is shitting on Kevin Smith. Yeah. He's good. We like him.
I don't know if you listened to his podcast for years, but he does make a lot of dick jokes. So.
Yeah.
Well, if you have one, it's bound to happen.
All right. Let's move on.
Okay, so we have about a half hour left of the show here, and there's not much movie left. We kind of covered all of the Adam and Eve stuff. The next bit is they chain him up with a harebrained scheme to take over the ship, but then he immediately just gets out. So like that's another moment where I was like,
they chained up the other one. It's not he got out.
They chained up the bad one. They chained up the bad one. In his chair.
He did somehow get out because he saved them by ashing on the frog, and then the frog moved over.
Well, that's after.
It all takes place in an imagination world.
The next scene.
Nothing makes sense.
The next vignette is the captain going to heaven thing, and it just goes to that. Like we don't. It's not really.
There's some dialogue.
About his friend. No, he was talking about his friend.
Yeah, there's some dialogue. The character's name's like Captain Stormridge or something. Captain Storm something.
Yeah.
Captain Stormfield. And they have a back and forth on the radio for a minute, and he's just like, "I'm in heaven. I got here finally. I got to heaven."
And then that's where he's
less than 13 parsecs or whatever. Like he took a shortcut or some shit.
That's where he sees.
Yeah, and then he gets there. Like, did you come straight here? Yeah.
Yeah, the aliens kind of grill him.
But the thing that
it's kind of funny.
The thing that this part does well is it's sort of it's not juxtaposing, but it's sort of showing what could happen if they crash literally into the Sphinx, because they're headed on a course right for the face of the Sphinx, and when we come back to our heroes, they're trying to figure out, and that's when the mysterious stranger. The other mysterious stranger with the cigar, who they've now been showing for little bits and pieces, he ashes, so the frog moves onto the thing. The ship stops right in front of the Sphinx, and that's when it's revealed that there's 2 Mark Twains.
So Mark Twain
dun. No, I am Mark Twain. No, I am Mark Twain.
Which one are you gonna shoot?
This movie rewrote a lot of history for me. I'll give it that much.
Well, okay. So, do we want to talk about the heaven vignette at all? Or
I kind of like the idea that there's not to say that I like, but different heavens for different people. Like, part of me almost like, oh, that kind of makes sense, sort of.
And that's from the original writing too. Not in the sense that there's 3-headed people and there's nothing like that, but in the sense that in it, Mark Twain talks about how there's all sorts of great people, and he lists people from other religions and other cultures. But then he also makes a point to mention that there's even more great people in heaven, greater than all the great people that that you've never heard of and never will.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And it's kind of saying that heaven is a place for everybody. and that all good people deserve a place up there. So, and I guess that little vignette touches on that kind of, but it also, when he gets to human heaven, it becomes a tad lackluster. Whereas,
Mark Twain's like, oh, that sounds like it sucks. He's like, go to heaven for climate and go to hell for conversation. Something like that, I think, right?
Yeah.
It's like the equivalent of like those TikTok videos where people are like, I don't want to go to heaven, they just want to go to hell. It's like, hell sounds way cooler.
Hell sounds way cooler, even if it depends on what ring of hell, probably.
But also, like, the heaven for that alien guy, like,
loved it.
Seemed pretty bumping, man.
They were hanging out with their pals, drinking beer.
They were doing it with their tails.
But that guy, the captain, was like, this seems like a nightmare. Like, what? Why would you put me in here? And it's like, the point, I guess, is like, there's a heaven, maybe even for specific different people, right? Like, there's not just an assigned heaven.
Yeah,
the way it kind of talked about it.
For some reason, when I was watching it again, it brought to my mind, and this is going to be a bit of a weird pull, but like Earth Chicks Are Easy, where they're in the clubs in that movie.
Nice,
right? Yeah,
and it's like a very hyper realized late 80s. I'm not too sure when that movie was made, but like late 80s, early 90s.
Literally like 86,
that sounds about right.
84 or 86.
Yeah. And yeah, like it was almost like that, but aliens and
Jim, Jeff, and Damon.
Yes, and for some reason that came to mind, where it was this feels like a bit of a pull on what they felt about 1980s club culture.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the characters are pretty queer coded too. I was like, these doormen seem like they're trying to say something about their
they're
sexuality.
All sucking each other's tail.
And I was like, this seems like innocently. They were doing it innocently enough to be like, oh, they're weird, they're different than you. Yeah. But
you wouldn't want to come in here, human.
Yeah. Today's logic, if they did that with like a kids movie, people would be like, what the fuck is this shit?
This movie is
made the doorman gay. Really gay, and he was stupid and bad and mean.
That whole segment, I really was the only time I was like, this is for the parents. This bit here is a little bit 100%. Of like, this is funny. This is funny in a modern way. Yeah. Like the sign outside says like beer and pizza, and I was like, yeah, beer.
Like it almost stands out as like a Family Guy sketch.
You think that's bad? Remember the time we went to
we accidentally went to alien heaven?
You can't come in here without a harp.
Hey, we want to put our tails inside of you.
All right, here's your gag ball, your butt plug, your larger butt
How long
plug.
did it take you to say Earth, though?
Front butt plug. What?
How long did it take you to say Earth? It's like, where are you from? San Fran, Cali, U.S.,
the world.
North America.
Well, he's American. He doesn't realize that anything outside of America.
Are you trying to say Americans are dumb?
No, yes. I'm saying that they don't understand that anything outside of their borders exists.
Yeah, they have issues.
I'm just joking.
With what's it called when you think your country's the center of the universe?
Well, not all of them, obviously.
But like
just the ones who don't.
Ethocentric.
There you go. Yeah. Anyway,
or ethnocentric. Oh my God, ethocentric is not a word. It's ethnocentric.
Oh, like extrovert.
Nope. Introvert is what I am on a Wednesday night after podcasting.
Oh, after.
No, I'm extroverted right now.
It means he becomes insular and doesn't want to talk to anybody, which is fine. I do it every day of my life. Mm-hmm. So yeah, let's move, I guess, past the heaven stuff. It is still funny. It's still modernly funny. I think it could be that same joke is told all the time, even today, in like modern stories. Right.
The thing that it made me think of is that we are all in heaven and hell of someone else's thoughts. So one person might put you in their heaven, another person might put you in their hell, right? I realize that it's not a direct correlation, but like that's what it made me think of, is that it's kind of abstract to a sense, like where it offers the idea that there's different heavens, right? You could be in one person, you could be in their heaven. With another person, you could be in their hell, because heaven and hell is just someone's thoughts and memories of you, and where they place you.
That's a good point. Yeah, and like more overtly, it's like these aliens are like, we don't understand what you're talking about. We're in our own heaven. Based on
check out all the butt plugs we've got.
Our own religion.
So many.
You took the Halley's Comet too far.
Your heaven
got off.
Your heaven, you just go and you hang out with your shitty fucking relatives for eternity, which sounds horrible.
I don't want to hang out with them.
But here, you can lock tails and suck on some delicious alien pizza.
Kiss four heads off this other person.
Here's right. I got this.
Oh my god! It looks like Satan is looking at us. It just looked like Satan was doing something weird.
Satan's hugging this man. So, and then the next part after the heaven scene is just the second part of the Adam and Eve bit, which we've touched.
Right.
Yeah, we
touched on it. We've got through it.
Except that we didn't say that Cain shows up as a hot biker at the end. Remember that? Talking about how Abel is so good, but then Cain came along, and man, oh man, he's a bad seed, and he's like at the end of the table, just sitting on a motorcycle, eating an apple with a knife. Yeah.
Born to be
to eat apples.
Then kill your brother.
It's a classic Bible jape. So yeah, then they almost run directly into the Sphinx. They're now almost to the comet, and we get a really cool, like, psychedelic, like, kind of climax chase thing. Pretty cool effect of the. I just was reading just verbatim. There was a really interesting scene where, like, something cuts the couch, and then a hand comes out of the meteorites, the meteorites. Yeah. Then a hand comes out of the couch and is like sewing it up. I thought that was one of the best, like
nanobots.
Yeah.
Mark Twain nanobots.
He's basically Iron Man. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't really cover, like, how he built this thing and why it's built, like, to feature his own works for him to look at over and over again. Yeah, those kind of contexts are just...
It actually kind of reminds me of Interstellar's elevator. Like how it goes.
Yeah, this movie reminds me of Interstellar in every single way.
Interstellar is actually a ripoff of...
No, sorry, did I say Interstellar? I meant Inception.
Yeah. Right. This is definitely closer to Inception because it's a weird dream.
The elevator that goes down to the opium den, that's just a dream layer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was trying to think of, like, what Mark Twain's Iron Man name would be, and I was like, the Dime Store Dynamo. It's like all I could think of in my brain. And he's just wearing, like, armor made of nickel.
In the shape of a suit.
I've got nickel poisoning. The only thing that'll protect me is my nickel-based armor.
I'm Nickelodeon.
My nickel nipples.
Yeah, the fucking fourth one is nickel nipples. No, Nickelodeon is his name.
That's his arch nemesis.
One day.
Nickel Nipples is at it again?
Local arcade.
Hey, speaking of, when are they going to reboot Darkwing Duck and Negaduck?
I thought that they did that recently. Let's just reboot everything all the time.
I hope that we get a Darkwing Duck, but I would prefer a movie into a TV series.
Darkwing Duck.
When there's something called DW.
No, we're not doing this.
Darkwing Duck.
Stop.
Let's get dangerous. So it turns out that there's a good Mark and a bad Mark. Mm-hmm. Well, he's not bad. A dark
just
Mark.
Like your grades on your report card.
And my dad's name is Dark Mark.
I had all normal marks.
Oh no!
None of them were dark.
Oh no!
See me after class. I love you.
Yeah, and there's another quote during this where he's talking about how, like, there's the dark side of all of us. That quote happens, but then he rattles off probably one of the best lines in the movie and says, "My books are water. Those of great geniuses are wine. Everyone drinks water." And I was like, oh, ooh. Mark Twain writes fucking the everyman story. He writes the stories, the folk.
But also that's like a really well-written line, which I think proves that he is actually a curator of masterpieces. Because he has so many of these little like golden nuggets of knowledge that are so simplified into a single sentence that are just like, oh yeah, that's true. That's
well,
cool.
the next scene is him just banging off lessons for like 5 minutes too. Like
they were just like ripping pages out of Mark Twain books and like throwing them at the writers, be like, here's this one and this one, and here's a couple of these.
I'm tired of writing this movie. I'm just putting the books in.
Yeah, exactly.
He's like, the underside of a pigeon is the top side of a rat.
That's what they always told me.
That's what they always told me in the old times.
West Virginia.
Basically the ending of this movie though is Huck and Tom get chosen to just drive the ship infinitely. Mark Twain
and Lady Girl
and Becky with the good hair.
Huckleberry Sue.
I think Mark Twain just disappears into the ether, and then they fly around a planet.
He becomes a star
he
child.
Turns into the ether. He becomes the world of imagination whirling around them as they disappear into the night.
This movie is basically Imagination Land, the episode of South Park.
I don't think it's
Halley's
that.
Comet.
I think they're quite different.
Like stuff from our solar system, probably, like because it orbits and shit, right? So it was probably a part of like the original shit, OG shit back in the day, right?
Big Bang.
Yeah.
So
the OG shit of our solar system. Halley's Comet, OG shit of soul.
So with
that's what our solar system's called, soul.
With great power comes great responsibility, as they say, and we've come to the end. That's what Mark
Twain said.
He wrote Spider-Man. He was the prototype Uncle Ben, in fact. And
then Final Fantasy stole it.
And then Final Fantasy stole all of it. The last segment we like to do on the show is our final thoughts. Before we do that, though, I like to open the floor. I've finished my notes a while ago. All I have left is my final thoughts. Do you guys have anything you'd like to add before we move on to our final thoughts? Keeping in mind that it is 11:05.
Well, I would like to say...
I'm looking your way.
I would like to say I appreciate you guys taking the time to give this movie a shot. And admittedly, it's not perfect, but it's one of those movies for me that I would put it with like Rock and Rule and a few other choice ones that kind of stood out from a time that was like, I don't know. I guess there's still an arena for this, but it just kind of comes from a time when people were really taking certain chances on things and not always successful. And certainly with this, like, you know, with a budget of 1.5 million and it only made 150,000 in the box office, like, you know, that's a financial failure. But you know, back in 2016, there was just this little bit of string of reviewers checking out this movie again, and with sincerity, like, you know, being honest about like its shortcomings, but also addressing its successes. And you know, because I think Will Vinton only passed away in 2018, so he managed to live long enough for that movie to kind of see some revival and some attention. And I think that's kind of cool that there's that kind of opportunity with the internet these days, amongst the rest of what the internet can provide. But
pornography.
Lots
I wasn't gonna say it.
But for this to be another part of that, of like taking a look at it and giving it a bit of exposure, because it was shortly after in 2016 when those reviews were coming back from people at like the New York Times and whatnot, that all of a sudden there were YouTube videos of check out this weird part from this movie that, like, I kind of wonder if there was some correlation between all of that in the consciousness of the internet, there was a little bit of attention thrown to this movie. And I always look forward to that kind of stuff thrown to all sorts of other movies, you know, like Something Wicked This Way Comes and stuff like that.
By Tupac?
Close. But so I guess that's my final thought, is that I really enjoy that we took a little bit of time in our lives to have a look at this and find some stuff to appreciate while being honest about all that kind of stuff. Bam.
So what I'll say, Tim, is you'll see as we do the rest of our final thoughts, I do a number rating. These guys do a nonsensical rating. I've moved more towards doing my number rating than a nonsensical. Do you have a final rating that you would put on this movie, whether it be out of 5, out of 10, or just some insanity?
Well, I'll give it an honest rating out of 10, and it's a personal lean for sure. But I would give it a 7 because of all the great effort that is put into it, whether to effect or not. It's still almost like in a restaurant, it takes just as much effort to bring you the wrong dish as it does the right one. So I am favorable for sure in that context. So, but yeah, I would say a good 7 out of 10 that I personally enjoy it enough for a rewatch.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate the input. You never know what your guests are going to be like, but I knew that you're able to talk. And people that can talk can podcast. You
can form words with your mouth.
You can form words. You're not the kind of person who you try to hold a conversation with, and they're just like, which I've always known about you. So thank you so much for being on the show. We'll come back and thank you again. I'm gonna quickly prattle off my bit because mine has a little bit of nuance to it. First and foremost, I'll say I was thoroughly impressed by the creativity and attention to detail in the animation. The film captures the essence of Twain's characters and works, and also manages to capture the essence of Twain himself with the quotes that they use throughout the movie. It brings him to life in a unique and engaging way, I thought. Okay. I particularly enjoy the clever use of stop-motion techniques, such as the use of shadows and miniature sets, to create a visually striking and pretty immersive experience. I wish the story had been a bit more cohesive, because the main story I thought was pretty cohesive, but jamming in the vignettes kind of subtracted from the whole thing. But I guess if I felt like either make it a vignette movie or make it just these kids going on an adventure, because they could have easily just gone to these worlds instead of you think that's bad, remember the time, and then they just go to that vignette. It could have been a lot more now we're in Adam and Eve world, and the things that we're seeing are happening to us. The Adam and Eve bit was particularly bad in my opinion. So what I did for my rating, right, is I give the story of this movie a 1. Okay. I rate it particularly low. I give the animation a 5 out of 5 because it's visually striking, as I said. It's immersive. It's interesting to look at. So I went to the old Google machine because I'm bad at math, and I said average. I said
add them, divide by
2.5.
No, average it. It's 3. And I think, so what I also then did is I mixed in my my music. I think I gave it a 3.5 or 4 for music.
Oh, that's a boost.
Put it up to a 3.1, my mans.
Yep.
This movie,
oh my God.
This movie gets a 3.1 out of 5 for me. I do recommend it to families and children. So maybe the 3 is warranted. And if I was going to give it a nonsensical rating, I give it a tree coming out of the ground that God creates on the day of creation, and
by accident.
By accident, and it produce the tree is a banana and it produces bananas.
I like you taking on the abstract rating system a lot.
I'm creative, so why not? I think that my rating system has been too rigid in the past, but I think Tim gave it a 7, I gave it a 3. Those are essentially the same rating, right? So
wow, yours is a little bit lower, but yeah.
Out of 10 and out of 5.
Yeah.
You gave it a 3.2, and I essentially gave it a 3.5.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think in that realm, I mean, if we take a quick gander at the old Metacritic, let's see what Rotten Tomatoes said about The Adventures of Mark Twain.
Oh, interesting. It's probably going to be all right.
Yeah, it's a kids movie. It's a 7.3 on IMDb and 80% on Rotten Tomatoes, and a 3 out of 5 on Common Sense.
I bet it's that Satan scene.
It's because of probably the resurgence, and also people have probably been showing this to their kids for fucking 37 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like, it's not a bad movie. It's just kind of difficult to watch now when you're watching shit like Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, which is amazing. And I watched it like 2 days ago, and I watched this, and I was like, ugh.
But the thing is in like 20 years from now, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio is going to be like, ugh. Look at the shitty CGI.
Probably, but I mean, I'm just saying, like, if you watch Pinocchio and then you watch this and you think of it as an evolution of an animation style, it's crazy. It's like night and day. The stuff they do in this Pinocchio movie, in terms of camera movement, and you remember that none of it is digital; it's all puppetry. It's amazing. And you look at this, and they do some really amazing stuff in this, but there's also some really basic things that you can see they hadn't figured it out yet. And like, how do we accomplish this? We don't know. We're experimenting.
Steve, on that note, why don't you go into your final thought from that?
Okay. Sure. I would say that this movie, though it was, kind of difficult to watch at times, it's like an interesting compilation of Mark Twain's literary history and, like I was saying, an excellent display of one of the most unnerving animation styles to exist, which is claymation. Like, you can get away with a lot with stop frame, and it doesn't quite creep you out in the same way that claymation does, just because things are, when the mask is transforming, for example, it's unnerving and unnatural looking, and it adds so much more to the uncomfortable nature of that scene, because even like, you can't imagine something moving like that. It's like the gnomes in Return to Oz. Like, there's just something so strange about the way that it's moving, that it almost feels like it's breaking and reforming itself. Like, it would be painful if that was your body doing that kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. There are moments that drag, and then there's moments that feel unhinged, but there's also moments that are extremely captivating, like the scene with Satan. It's just like, even if you're watching this movie, glancing at your phone here and there, kind of getting bored at the, like, this woman doesn't know how humans are supposed to act. I'm like, oh God. But then the Satan scene pops on, and you're pulled in. You're completely invested in it, because the atmosphere, the lack of color when in a movie that's so up to this point has been so colorful, it just kind of like flips tonally completely on its end, and it grabs you. It grabs your attention. I think of the use of Mark Twain's work lay an interesting skeleton for like the through line of the tale, right? Like, the tale itself is kind of whatever, like, it's a very standard story, and it's basically just a literal vessel for the characters, but also a vessel for the movie, which is the telling of these stories in sort of an anthology style. The use of characters that we know, Tom Sawyer and his friends are all characters that most people are familiar with. I think even today, you're still taught Mark Twain in school when you're in like middle school and stuff, right? Or at the very least, teachers will take you aside and be like, you should read this. I think it would really speak to you, kind of thing. But I think also making those characters sort of like empty-headed vessels was a good idea, because you don't really want them to have too much agency in the storytelling, because it's not about them, and it's more about us reflecting on Mark Twain as a person. And it's like, if this is the man and this is the work he created over his life, what kind of man is he? And I think that's sort of like what you're meant to soak up while you're watching this. The Satan moment, was based on the short story, or sorry, not a short story. I think it's a full book. It's even just that part alone is worth watching. I know that it went viral like a couple years ago and everybody was watching it, but I think if you haven't seen this movie and you don't plan on watching it, that scene by itself is worth checking out, just to like appreciate the design of the character, which I think is amazing, as well as, just the nature of the conversation that's being had through that visual storytelling. Skipping ahead, there's a lot of boring stuff. The Adam and Eve and the bullfrog I did not care for too much. I did enjoy the alien heaven. I thought it was funny, and I think it's a joke that has probably been told before this movie and has been told a million times since, but it still has the same sort of impact. If this movie didn't exist, it's possible that Laika would not either. So its value in that fact alone is uncontestable, in my opinion. I think that without this movie existing, so many movies that I absolutely love would not be here today. And so I give this movie the ranking of a movie that people want to have watched, but nobody wants to actually watch.
That's a quote from the movie, right? He says,
except something. I switched the books to movie.
And that, like, I get that sentiment because there's so many movies are kind of like that too, except movies are easily digestible, but books are very much either you're the kind of reader who can get through a 400-page novel in a few days, or you're the kind of reader that gets like, I'm going to read a 400-page novel over the course of the next year or more. I very much fall into the latter. Sometimes I'll get motivated and I'll fucking read a book, but for the most part, I want to read the classics. I do. I promise you I do. But
some of the classics,
I can tell you right now, some classics. And some of them are classics, but they're so dry and hard to read. If you've ever read Frankenstein, ooh baby.
I read
oh my God,
Naked Lunch, and it made me never want to read a book again.
Yeah, you have talked about this so many times on this podcast. We should just rename this podcast Jason Hates Naked Lunch.
I hate the movie and I hate the book. I hate the book significantly more than the movie. The movie makes...
Or we should call the podcast Clothed Lunch with Jason.
Clothed Breakfast with Jason Phillips. Okay. Kaylin, why don't you take us home, buddy? I fucking loved this show tonight. Let's see what you have to say for yourself.
Well, thank you very much. And hopefully I can top off a cherry on this cake. First and foremost, I just want to get out of the way that the Satan scene was my favorite. There was also, there were a few quotables. One of the ones that we didn't mention that stood out for me was when he mentioned, a man with a new idea is a fool until the idea succeeds.
Yeah, that's good.
And that really stuck with me a lot. For
some reason, Kaylin, sorry, I just want to interrupt. I picture you standing up on your couch and there's a bunch of like blueprints that you've drawn behind you on the wall, and you're like, and you call the patent office like immediately. Hello, get me the patent office.
I got one.
You're just talking to like a cell phone that you haven't typed any numbers into yet.
It's just a candle. Well, just a candle that catches its own wax.
I have ideas, man. I got ideas like just like pouring out.
Yeah.
It's just a candle that, like, when the wax goes down it goes back into the candle, creating a new candle.
Those are those new candles. I hate those candles.
I didn't think that existed.
I created a better system. You like pull out this huge elaborate candle system. All right, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just had to.
No, you're just adding on.
That visual comedy I pictured in my brain.
It's like a well-seasoned skillet or whatever where you don't wash it.
You do have to wash your
skillet. It just has a bunch of flavor.
You just don't wash it that hard. So
he's got his designs on the wall that it pans over to a kitchen with just like a disgusting cast iron pan.
It looks like Ren and Stimpy. It looks like Ren and Stimpy. Like it's extra disgusting.
Oh God.
Jason, to piggyback a little bit off of the last part you were talking about in regards to books, so in school when we were forced to read books, I didn't do it. I'll tell you right now, I'm an honest person. I didn't do it, but I came across.
You're not being interrogated for murder. I didn't do it.
I didn't read them. Let's see.
It wasn't me.
I think though that books find people when they're supposed to. Okay. I've read books that I was supposed to read back when that wouldn't have had the same impact on me had I read them then versus read them now, or like read them when I came across them.
Yeah.
So for this movie though, I do want to say that it did, where I feel it succeeds is that it, aside from the technical, like straight up off the top, the technical aspect of this movie, I really enjoyed the claymation style, the effort put into it. I mentioned earlier, the perfectly imperfectness of it, the texture. I'll even be brazen enough to say that I think I would take claymation over CGI. Maybe any day, maybe. But the one area that this movie succeeded for me was that it did make me interested to kind of dive more into Mark Twain and kind of learn more about it. So one other thing I wrote, I don't know, this touches on the Satan scene. If you lived forever, it's kind of inevitable that you would be cynical, is kind of how I felt about that. What else did I say here? I did have a good watch. It was a fun little adventure. I came into this movie assuming it to be a kid's movie, and then that frame of mind being ever so slightly shifted. It's like it's kid but like teenage sort of, but then also I'm a grown man watching it for the first time, and so I have a little bit more of a consciousness or like a thought process behind it, the different things that were going on and that was being discussed throughout it. Okay, so I give this movie. Give me a moment. Just give me a moment. One more moment. One more.
A visual medium.
Mark Twain issued bourbon or some shit. Like
one second.
How Tom Sawyer bourbon. Huckleberry bourbon.
Okay, here it comes. I give this movie.
Did you buy clay for this?
1 second.
Oh no.
You could have done this. He's
like trying to this motherfucker. You could have sculpted it before the podcast started.
Yeah, but it wouldn't make it as poignant.
I think it would have been funny.
I think it would have been
just like a clay human or whatever and smashed it, or whatever your plan is. He's making a flying squirrel.
I give this movie. Does that come through?
Yeah.
Yeah. It looks like he's shot putting something.
Tim, I want to say thank you for joining us, and thank you for bringing this to my attention, to say the least. And I hope to see more of you.
Oh yeah, thank you all very, very much for having me on. This has been a really fun experience, and thank you for indulging me on this movie, because I can't imagine other people that I could like. Must be like pulling teeth for some people to watch something like this. So I really appreciate you guys taking a chance on it.
Next week, Captain Io.
Tim, what I like to do with our guests, well, you're the second guest ever, so what I like to do, what I'm going to do is, do you have anything you want to plug? I know you don't really have anything in the creator space.
No, I in the future I would like to do some.
He's gonna start his own pod.
Phelan, he's
blow
talking.
Up bigger than us. He's gonna we're not even gonna be able to reach him anymore.
I always remember the little people along the way, but down the line I do want to do some creative works online, but I'll be sure to share that with you guys when the time is right. But at the moment, it's all in pre-production, as they say.
That's great.
Like a weird murder podcast that like focuses very specifically on like a certain type of crime.
Time.
Only eyeball stuff. Only people who got their eyeballs popped out.
Eyeballs only.
I do want to thank you again for being on the show tonight. Doing guests.
I think when it came down to guests, you were already at the top of the list for what me and Jason were of people we wanted to ask. So
we also we do want to do a guest per month, and I can finding a time where you end up just being the de facto backup guest every month.
If you're down, to come back.
If you're down, obviously.
Absolutely down to clown for that. Yeah, just give a shout and give me a heads up so I have a chance to watch the movie we're going to talk about, and then I'm there. Just say the word.
Awesome. And another thing we like to do at the end of every episode is say a little phrase, and then another.
Oh, wait, hold on. Wait.
Wait.
Kalen, I don't want to alarm you, but I think Satan's about to squish you. He's got his hand ready to go. He's about to squish your ass.
For Tim, and for Kaylin, and for Steve, I'm Jason.
For Jason, for Kaylin, for Tim, I am Steve.
For Tim, for Steven, for Jason, I'm Kellen.
And for Jason, for Kaylin, for Steve, I am Tim.
And we always have to ask every single week of the month, hey, did you see
this
one?
one?
Did you see it?
Did you see this one?
Hey.
Did you see this one?
Hey,
did you see?
I thought we were gonna try and all saying it at the same time. Wasn't that a thing we wanted to try and do?
Okay, let's try it. 3.
I was right. Can we do one right quick clip where we all smile, just for I can post it on the thing?
Yeah. Did you get it?
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
And
Sorry.
Hey, did you see
3, 2, 1? Are we 3, 2, 1?
Yeah. 3, 2, 1.
Hey.
Did
you see this one?
What?
I think my hay was
That was good.
Early, but it's good.
I like
or we could just do it so that one of us says hey, and then we all go, did you see this one at the same time? We gotta practice
like,
it.
Are you
in the mirror? I don't know. I think
Dark Canadian, Canadian, right?
If we get a good moment where one of us says hey, and then we all kind of like, did you see this one? We say it at the same time. We can get it.
Who's a good hey person? Jason?
Hey.
Steven's a good hey person.
Hey.
Did you see this one?
Anyway, we should say thanks to Tim again one more time. Thanks, Tim.
Tim, I love you. We just met you virtually.
I've known you forever already. Love you all very much.
Tim, hope to have you back. I think this is the when you watch like a talk show and they're talking but you can't hear them? They can hear us.
It's like the opposite, so it's not like our mouths are flapping.
They can't see it.
It's like what Mark Twain used to say. He used to say, a steamboat in the sky is worth 5 in a pie.